Okay, awesome fourth grade math teachers. Welcome back to another Prep Talk video. In this video, we will be discussing problem solving using all four operations mixed together and with strip diagrams and equations. So here we go. Let's talk about some of the resources that will be available to you as you finish up division. So the learning objectives, we want students to be able to solve problems involving all four operations using strip diagrams and equations and two different strategies. We want them to be able to show us the two different strategies so that they can check their answer and see how the strategies relate to one another and get a feel for which one they like more. And then the other thing I want to discuss in this video is the beginning of fraction number talks with your students. As we move throughout the year, we will begin talking more about fractions, and so we want to create an opportunity for you to start talking about that with your students even now. So we'll discuss fraction number talks to begin the video. Let's take a look at this fraction number talk that we'll use for day one. You'll start by just projecting this as the number talk first. You'll have students think about it without paper and see if they can come up with an answer and a way to solve it. Some of them might see that these are common denominators and so then start adding the numerators and get 2 over 2, which they know is a whole, and so it equals to 1. But really, we want students to do this in a visual way, and that's why we put the blocks here so that they would see those and use those. Taking these two orange pieces, which are the same as these two orange pieces, and moving them over to this piece shows me that I have one whole as my final answer. After you've had students talk about that, you've elicited discussion on that first problem, go to problem number 2, where students will be doing the same thing, 1/4 plus 1/4. Some students, again, may look at the common denominators and tell you that the answer is 2 over 4, and that's okay. We do want them to be able to tell us that it's 1/2, but 2 over 4 will work as well as long as we're explaining that it needs to be simplified. But again, what we see is that we can move this one piece over with its friend, and we will then have a half of an entire whole. And so the answer to the second one would be 1/2. Then we show them the third problem, and this is for the first time where we have different denominators. Now, you might start having some students reach for that pen and paper and start trying to work this out by getting like denominators, but that's not the point. What we want students to see is the concept behind a fraction, that if I take this 1/4 and move it over here with this 2/4, I'm going to end up with 3 out of 4. That's what a fraction is, and that is how it works. We don't want them just going to the rules or the algorithms. We want them to be able to see it and visualize it so that it will actually make sense. On day 2 of fraction number talks, this will be much of the same, except this time we'll be involving eighths. And so you'll see that we'll actually be starting with the same problem that we ended day 1 on, 1/2 plus 1/4, but this time we have our models broken up into eighths. And so this one actually represents 4 over 8, and this one represents 2 over 8. When I move the 2 over with the 4, I get 6 out of 8. And if I think of it in terms of fourths, then I've got 3 out of 4. And students can visualize that in order to get their answer. Number 2, again, this is something that we don't want students immediately reaching for pencil and paper for because the visuals really help here. Here I have 4 out of 8. And if I move the 1 out of 8 over, then I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 8. And I can do that visually without having to write anything down. Finally, in number 3, very similar to number 2, this time though we just have 1 out of 4, or another way to say that is 2 out of 8. And if we move the 1 out of 8 over, then we will have 3/8 as the answer to that fraction problem. So in this video, I don't really have any star-released questions to go over with you. We've already covered that in previous Prep Talk videos. And so since this is just the closure of division and really our problem-solving unit, I just want to go over some of the resources that are available to you and your team as you plan for the lessons for this week. The first of those resources that I want to mention is the numberless word problem. This is Frances's story about how she used small, medium, and large cups to serve punch. And as you look at this resource that is in our curriculum, you'll see that the numbers are gradually released to the students so that they are having to think through each aspect of the problem and immerse themselves into Frances's story to understand what is going on using those reading comprehension skills. Sometimes when students see a lot of numbers, they get bogged down in that and things become confusing. But if they can really dissect each of these statements first without even really noticing the numbers, then we might be able to get them to understand a very complex problem such as this one. And so you will have students not only going chunk by chunk through this problem, but drawing a strip diagram to help them with each and every piece of this complex word problem. And our hope is that through this, you will be able to get the thinking out of your students' heads and out into the air through questioning so that you can then evaluate what is being said and help either affirm that it's correct or correct it when it is wrong. But it's very important that students are also drawing strip diagrams to illustrate their thinking as they work through each piece of this story. The second resource or activity that I want to mention to you is one called Mixed Measures. This is from our Teach Transform book that is referenced in our curriculum. And so as you look at the directions here, I'm not going to read them to you word for word, but you'll see that this is a group activity where students are working together to draw a strip diagram, label the whole, divide it into parts, fill in the labels and the numbers, and then eventually discuss the strip diagrams that they created together and see if they agree or disagree, and then work together to write the equation and solve the problem. More than likely, this is going to be need to be modeled in your classroom. You're probably not going to be able to just give this to the students and have them go for it. So be sure that you model a question before you release them to the group activity. And the really nice part of this activity is that each person is getting to do each step, but they're working to correct one another as they go throughout the process. For example, if I'm on step 3 and my job is to fill in the labels and the numbers, well, I'm going to need to make sure that step 1 and step 2 are correct first. And so if they're not, I can go back and talk to the person who is in charge of step 1 and step 2 for that particular strip diagram and see what went wrong in their thinking. And so this is a highly collaborative activity where students are working together. And you as the teacher are walking around, analyzing conversations, inserting comments where they need to be inserted, and redirecting where you hear misconceptions. And so please use this activity. It is a great activity for your students to be able to discuss in depth in a group a word problem, dissect it, and come up with a plan of attack for solving it. That's the end of this relatively short video on our closure over this division unit. If you have any questions about these resources, you can reach out to me or Sherry. Our email addresses are listed right there. And again, as always, before you go, please be sure to fill out our survey. You can leave us a question there or any comments or feedback that you have about the video. Hopefully this is serving you well as you prepare your students in 4th grade math. Good luck to you, and please let us know if you have any questions.